Welcome back everyone to another archetype review. I'm Frizz, and today we're going to be covering an archetype from the Abomination Vault's adventure path, the Ghost Hunter. If you're concerned about spoilers for this adventure path, then I wouldn't say that you should be that scared, considering that the archetype name is probably one of the biggest spoilers in the entire archetype, so you're already over that hurdle. There are some other minor spoilers in it, but nothing in that, in my opinion, as someone who's been playing the AP, would take away from the impact of it, and if anything, knowing a little bit about the AP and just very vague stuff about what kind of environments you're going to be in is probably going to help you make a character that fits the tone of the AP best. But that's just my opinion, and it's up to you to determine whether or not you want to keep on watching the video if you're planning on playing it. And yeah, the biggest spoiler is that there's a bunch of undead, which is not a surprise at all since it's, an adventure path. So obviously there's undead, and the player's guide also mentions that there's a bunch of undead. So really, there are basically no spoilers, in my opinion, in this archetype itself. And I'm going to be careful to mention anything about the AP outside of that it's very good and you should play it. Without further ado, let's talk about the Ghost Specialist archetype, the Ghost Hunter. The Ghost Hunter dedication is uncommon, and it's pretty good, but to be able to take it, you have to be trained in either occultism or religion. Honestly, either one of them would be appropriate, but religion makes a little bit more sense because, shockingly, Ghost Hunter deals with a lot of undead, so being able to recall knowledge on them is good, but either one of them works just fine. Whenever you take this dedication, you become trained in either Spirit Lore or Haunt Lore. If you're trained in both of them already, then you get to choose a different lore of your choice. Also, both of these lores work very well with other abilities in the archetype, so I would actually recommend trying to become trained in both of them at least. The other benefit of this dedication is that you get 2 occult cantrips that have the Divination, Enchantment, or Necromancy trait, and you are now able to cast those. In my eyes, the 2 standout options that you can choose are Detect Magic and Guidance, since those are both generally helpful for basically every single type of character in the entire game. So having those is nice, but there are going to be other options that might fit your character better. So basically, you get some very minor occult spellcasting, but it's a bit more restricted than other spellcasting archetypes in that it must be a Divination, Enchantment, or Necromancy spell. Or spells, because you get 2 of them. At level 4, Graves' Voice is for ghost hunters who don't necessarily want to deal with every ghost or haunt with extreme violence, and who actually want to talk to them. You can now use either Spirit Lore or Haunt Lore to make an impression or request things of incorporeal creatures, though you still have to actually be able to run into incorporeal creatures who will want to be, listen to you and want to talk. Essentially, you can now use Spirit Lore or Haunt Lore instead of Diplomacy whenever you're dealing with ghosts. This will help out a bit, because a lot of the time, ghosts are only around due to having something that they need to have fulfilled, or, something in their life went wrong whenever they died, and they want to get that resolved before they can move on. So, being able to talk to a ghost is a pretty surefire way of being able to figure out what you need to do to put them to rest permanently. The Investigate Hauntings feat is another level 4 feat that is very, very good, if you know that you're going to be running into haunts or incorporeal undead frequently. And it actually makes use of the rarely used Investigate Exploration activity. No matter what your exploration mode is, you now get a free recall knowledge about incorporeal undead or haunts that you run into, using a relevant skill, which you probably will with either Spirit or Haunt Lore. This will obviously help you out in a lot of situations where you run into haunts or, ghosts, but it's especially helpful with the haunts in my mind. Oftentimes, it's not obvious how to actually calm or damage a haunt, so being able to get that free recall knowledge is good for figuring out that information so you can help out in combat. On top of that, you also get a +2 circumstance bonus on any skill check where you're trying to disable a haunt, which makes dealing with them a lot more manageable. Overall, taking Investigate Hauntings is going to make you hyper aware of the spirits around you, and will make you pretty much a specialist at dealing with haunts. The Spirit Spells feat is the last level 4 feat of this archetype, and it's a pretty straightforward upgrade to your spellcasting. Overall, it's actually pretty similar to how almost every spellcasting archetype gets the ability to cast a couple of, normal spells that aren't cantrips. You now choose a 1st level occult spell, which you can now cast once per day. At 6th level, you learn a 2nd level spell, and at 8th, you learn a 3rd level occult spell. Similarly to the cantrips that you can get from the dedication to this archetype, these spells have to be divination, enchantment, or necromantic spells. Thankfully, you do have a good amount of options from the occult list, so you have a very good selection to pick from. Although, I would, warn you against picking something that relies on a saving throw from an enemy, due to, generally, you are probably not going to have a very good save DC for people, so they're probably going to be more likely to succeed. So I would recommend more choosing things that are buff spells or just utility. Weirdly enough, you don't actually get any signature spells, meaning that you cannot heighten any of these, which means that if you really, really want to be boring and just get 3 True Strikes that you can cast once a day, then you need to pick it at all 3 levels, which is a bit unfortunate, but it also means that you're less likely to actually do that, meaning that you can start picking up some more interesting spells. Overall, getting spells is a very nice boon, and you can use it to get a lot of really interesting effects. At level 6, for 2 actions, if you take the Ghost Strike feat, you can now help deal with Restless Undead whenever they don't want to talk to you. When you use this ability once a day, one weapon that you're carrying gets the Ghost Touch rune for 10 minutes. At 10th level, you can now give the Ghost Touch rune to 2 different weapons. This is interesting, and the important part is that you don't have to be the one to be wielding the weapon. If you know that you're about to be dealing with an angry ghost, you can just grab the fighter's sword and give them the ability to stab the ghost better, greatly helping out the party in the fight. While generally getting a rune once per day for the cost of a feat is not the greatest use of a class feat, Ghost Touch is one of those runes that when you need it, you really do need it, since it adds a ton of damage whenever you're fighting a ghost. So I think this is worth it, especially if you know that you're going to be in a campaign where ghosts are bound to come up, which, honestly, if you're taking this archetype, you should already be pretty confident on that decision. At level 8, the Peer Beyond feat helps you get a lot, and I mean a lot better at dealing with haunts and ghosts. You now get a +2 circumstance bonus on saving throws against mental effects that are caused by incorporeal undead or haunts, and you can even roll Spirit Lore or Haunt Lord for initiative if you know that one of those is going to be present. The initiative bonus here is nice if you have a good intelligence, but it's still kind of situational, and it will depend a lot on your class and what kind of proficiency you have with perception or other skills. So it's kind of hard to judge that, because if you're putting skill increases into Haunt or Spirit Lore, then this is great. If you aren't, then it's kind of meh. The bonus on saving throws is a lot better though, since if you're going to be running into haunts and ghosts a lot, which you should if you have this archetype, then mental effects are pretty common, since those types of encounters are generally very spooky, and spooky stuff generally has the mental effect. Finally, whenever you are around a ghost or undead and they are defeated, you get a chance to see a vision on how to permanently remove or exorcise the haunt, or ghosty. In case you didn't know, and I mentioned this earlier, just beating up a ghost or haunt often does not permanently get rid of them, so you have to, put them to rest, or deal with their final business, and that will be what finally, gets rid of them for good. With this feat, whenever someone, puts down a ghost or a haunt, as, not even an action, you get to roll Haunt or Spirit Lore, whichever is appropriate for the situation, against a DC of the Haunt or Spirit's level when one is beaten. If you succeed, then you get a cryptic sort of hint on how to put them to rest, and on a critical success, you learn the exact method of doing so. This is, generally, very, very handy, since often the hardest thing about dealing with these types of encounters is how to make sure that they don't come back and you have to do it all over again. A lot of the time, that's going to be guesswork, and being able to have, something taking you in the right direction is going to be nice. Also, since this is not a recall knowledge check, you don't get incorrect information if you critically fail, and I don't believe it's even a secret check, so you know exactly how well you did. Overall, it just makes you way, way better at dealing with haunts and ghosts, which is exactly what this archetype is about, so it stays on target and executes it well. Overall, the Ghost Hunter archetype is absolutely amazing for particular types of campaigns. If you know that you're going to be fighting a lot of undead or going into a lot of spooky places, then it is genuinely great because it gives you a ton of very good bonuses for those situations. But if you are not running into those situations, then you being a specialist in dealing with ghosts and haunts is going to really never come up. Because of this, if you are a GM who is watching this, and one of your players wants to be a ghost hunter, then please include more ghosts and haunts into your campaign, because your player is sure to appreciate it, because nothing is worse than having a cool class feature and never being able to use it. Also, ghosts and haunts are just great for adding a bit more flavor and depth to a campaign, so they're just fun little things that you can add in. You don't have to do them constantly, they should just be present. Also, your player's probably going to go out of their way to try and find them, so being ready and having them prepared is always going to be useful. Overall, while this archetype fits into a pretty specific niche, it does its job well, and that kind of niche shows up a lot in Pathfinder anyway, so I feel like it is justified for existing despite being exceptionally situational. Thanks for watching the video. This has been a pretty fun one to get out, since I'm actually playing through Abomination Vaults currently, so it's kind of interesting to talk about a archetype that comes from that AP specifically. Also, in case you are curious, it is a very, very good AP, and if you're looking for a fantastically done dungeon crawl, then I can't suggest it highly enough. If you've got any constructive criticism about the video, then I'd love to hear it down below. Or if you just have thoughts on this or any other archetypes, either if it's your experiences with the Ghost Hunter archetype, or just, you want me to talk about a particular archetype, I would love to hear it. As always, liking, commenting, and subscribing are the best ways to support my channel currently, because that is what tells YouTube that it's a good video and that other people should see it. Until I see you next, live a wonderful life.